The National Foundation for Credit Counseling just coined a new term, and I think it's one of the most important phrases in American finance right now. The term is survival debt, not vacation debt, not discretionary spending debt, not the kind of debt you accumulate buying things you don't need. Survival debt, the kind of debt you accumulate when your paycheck doesn't cover groceries. When you put your utility bill on your Visa because the alternative is sitting in the dark. When you charge a prescription on your MasterCard because the alternative is going without medication. This is what's now driving a significant and growing portion of America's $1.25 trillion credit card balance. Let that number land for a moment. $1.25 trillion. That's up $482 billion since just Q1 of 2021. In 5 years, Americans added nearly $500 billion to their collective credit card balance. Credit counseling demand is up 24% year over year. Monthly volume is now 60% above the 2018 baseline. And here's the line that should end the entire personal finance industry's lecture about lights and avocado toast. Urban Institute economist Breno Braga said it plainly, quote, "When food, housing, and healthcare are all more expensive, there is less money to pay off your credit card." Today I'm telling the full story of America's 2026 credit card crisis. The real data. The structural forces behind it, why the personal finance industry's standard prescriptions often miss the point, and whether the most honest book ever written about that industry gives us a genuine path out. Welcome to Earnings Per Page. Honest finance, no hype. Hit subscribe. Let's get into it. Part 1. The real numbers behind the $1.25 trillion. Let me give you the actual data, not the spin. Total U.S. credit card balance in Q1 2026 is $1.252 trillion, down slightly from the record $1.277 trillion in Q4 2025, which itself was the highest since the New York Fed began tracking this data in 1999. The average credit card balance per household is $11,153. The average APR on credit cards accruing interest is 21.52% in Q1 2026. The average APR on new credit card offers is 23.79%. 42% of Americans believe they will have credit card debt their entire lives. Nearly 2 in 5 people say they expect to have more credit card debt by the end of 2026 than they do today. Here is the math that makes the 21% interest rate devastating. If you carry the average balance of $6,500 at 21% and make only minimum payments, you will pay roughly $1,365 in interest in the first year alone. You will take over 7 years to pay off the balance, assuming you make no new purchases. You will pay more in interest than you borrowed in the first place. Credit card debt at 21% isn't a financial inconvenience. It is mathematically designed to trap people. Part 2. The K-shaped debt crisis. Here's the story hiding inside the aggregate numbers, and it's the same K-shape we talked about in video 29. One America is servicing its debt just fine. The other is quietly drowning. Super prime borrowers, the top 40% by credit score, have seen their financial position improve since 2019. Near prime and subprime borrowers, roughly the bottom 30%, face rising expenses, higher balances, and a debt-to-income squeeze that's made every payment harder. The 30-day delinquency rate on credit cards hit its highest level since 2011, 15 years. We were still digging out from the 2008 financial crisis, the last time we saw stress at this level. 3.6 million federal student loan borrowers entered default in the last 2 quarters alone, approximately 1 million in Q4 2025 and 2.6 million more in Q1 2026. When economists say the consumer is resilient, they are measuring the top half of the income distribution. The bottom half is not showing up in those averages. It is showing up in credit counseling offices. It is showing up in delinquency data. It is showing up in the survival debt numbers. Part 3. Why standard personal finance advice fails here. Now I want to be direct about something. If you search for credit card debt on YouTube, most videos will tell you some variation of the following. Stop buying things you don't need. Build a budget. Use the debt snowball or avalanche method. Stop drinking lattes. Get a side hustle. These aren't bad ideas. For some people, they work, but they contain an embedded assumption that the personal finance industry rarely challenges. The assumption is that your debt is primarily a behavioral problem, a result of spending choices you made. and that the solution is primarily behavioral, spending choices you need to change. The survival debt framing challenges that assumption directly. If you're charging groceries because your paycheck doesn't cover food, the lat isn't the problem. The gap between your income and your survival costs is the problem. Behavioral advice is very good at optimizing margin. It cannot create margin that doesn't exist. Part 4. The book that exposes the real problem. This is where Helaine Olen's book Pound Foolish comes in, and why I think it's the most important personal finance book almost nobody in mainstream finance talks about. Pound Foolish, published in 2012, is a thorough, well-documented investigation of the personal finance industry itself. Olen's central argument is that the personal finance industry, books, TV shows, advisors, gurus, has built a multi-billion-dollar business on a fundamental misdirection. They attribute financial struggle to individual behavior while systematically ignoring the structural forces that have made financial stability increasingly impossible for a growing portion of Americans. She examines Suze Orman, who told audiences their financial problems were about self-esteem while selling books, courses, and partnerships with financial institutions. She documents Dave Ramsey's framework, which works brilliantly for people with income surplus, but which treats income adequacy as a given when it's increasingly not. She analyzes the entire 41 Zakar system, which shifted retirement risk from employers to employees under the assumption that average people could successfully navigate financial markets, an assumption that the 955 median retirement savings number we covered in video 28 now definitively disprove. Olen's most devastating observation is structural. The personal finance industry grew to enormous size precisely when American wages began stagnating relative to costs. It filled the vacuum created by the decline of unions, pensions, employer loyalty, and the social safety net. It told people that the solution to structural problems was personal responsibility, and it made billions of dollars doing so. Part 5. What does actually work? Now, the honest practical section. Because understanding why the standard advice is limited doesn't help you if you have credit card debt right now and need to do something about it. Here's what the data and honest financial analysis actually supports. First, if you have any margin, attack high-interest debt with extreme urgency. A 21% credit card APR is mathematically your worst enemy. No investment in legal markets reliably beats 21% returns. Paying off a 21% credit card is the equivalent of earning a guaranteed 21% on your money. If you have any investable cash and any credit card debt above 10% APR, pay the debt first. The math is unambiguous. Second, the debt avalanche beats the debt snowball on a strict math basis. Pay minimum payments on everything, then throw every extra dollar at your highest interest debt first. The debt snowball, paying smallest balances first, is better psychologically for some people. But if you can maintain the discipline, the avalanche saves you more money over time. The difference on a $10,000 multi-card debt at various rates can be hundreds or thousands of dollars. Third, consider a balance transfer if your credit score allows it. Many credit cards offer 0% introductory APRs on balance transfers for 12 to 21 months. If you can move a balance to a 0% card and commit to paying it off within that window, you eliminate the interest burden entirely during that period. The catch: there's typically a 3 to 5% transfer fee, and if you don't pay it off before the promotional period ends, the rate resets to a high APR. This is a power tool. Use it carefully. Fourth, call your credit card company and negotiate. This is the Dave Ramsey advice that actually works. Call your issuer and ask for a lower interest rate. Tell them you've been a customer for X years and you'd like a courtesy rate reduction. Studies consistently show this works in roughly 70% of cases for people with decent payment history. 60 seconds on the phone can save you thousands of dollars. Fifth, if you're in genuine survival debt, charging essentials because income doesn't cover them. The solution starts with income, not budgeting. Credit counseling is genuinely useful here. The National Foundation for Credit Counseling offers free and low-cost counseling and debt management plans. These are not debt settlement companies. They are nonprofits that can negotiate lower interest rates with creditors and build structured repayment plans. Credit counseling demand is up 24% this year for a reason. Part 6. The broader honest truth. Here's the synthesis I want you to take from this video. The personal finance industry is not dishonest in what it prescribes. The debt snowball works. Budget apps work. The avalanche method works. Balance transfers work. The industry is limited in what it acknowledges. It rarely admits that for a growing portion of Americans, the problem isn't poor financial choices. It's the structural gap between what people earn and what it costs to survive in 2026. Acknowledging this gap doesn't mean giving up. It means being precise about what advice actually helps in your specific situation. If you have income surplus that behavioral changes can redirect, standard personal finance advice works. If you have no surplus because your income genuinely doesn't cover your costs, the solution starts with increasing income, not cutting expenses that you've already cut. The conversation about survival debt is the most important financial conversation America isn't having loudly enough. It changes who we blame, from individuals who made bad choices to a system that has made good choices progressively harder. And it changes what we prescribe, from purely behavioral fixes to a combination of individual action and structural reform. Final verdict on Pound Foolish. Should you read it? Yes, but with realistic expectations. It's a critique of an industry, not a how-to guide. You'll finish it understanding why so much standard personal finance advice feels inadequate in 2026. You may not finish it knowing exactly what to do next. Pair it with something practical. I'd suggest the Total Money Makeover for Behavioral Framework, and this video for the honest context around where it applies and where it doesn't. My rating, 8 out of 10. Loses 2 points for being occasionally polemical at the expense of actionable guidance. But the diagnosis is correct and the documentation is thorough. If this gave you an honest framework for understanding your debt situation, subscribe to Earnings Per Page. Next time I'm covering the most important investing story of Q 2026, the AI infrastructure build-out, who's really winning, and whether any of it is priced correctly. Drop a comment with what kind of debt is currently your biggest challenge. See you in the next one.